evening and welcome to another edition of the COVID-19 pandemic update on Channels Television in collaboration with the Ford Foundation. I'm Millicent Walker. Here are some of the highlights this hour. Today, ahead of the planned resumption of schools for graduating students in Nigeria, we'll look at the benefits therein and the possibilities that stare us in the face. Low turnout of air travelers as flight operations between Abuja and Lagos resume. And United States registers record daily tally 60,000 of new coronavirus cases. And while Africa has recorded 508,710 coronavirus cases, Nigeria has confirmed 29,879 cases after 503 infections in 24 hours. According to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC), all 36 states have reported a confirmed case of COVID-19 and the Federal Capital Territory. 12,108 patients have so far recovered and 15 deaths were recorded in eight states, putting the death toll at 669. So far, the top 5 states with the highest cases in Nigeria are Lagos, the FCT, Oyo, Edo, and Delta states, while the bottom 5 you have Kogi, Cross River, Taraba, Ekiti, and Yobe states. In 24 hours, 14,435 samples have been tested, putting the total samples tested in Nigeria at 169,629. Now, on the 29th of June, President Muhammadu Buhari, through the Presidential Task Force of COVID-19, approved the extension of the second phase of the eased lockdown by another 4 weeks, with some modifications with effect from Tuesday, 30th June to midnight of July 27, 2020. The federal government also announced a safe reopening of schools, with only students in graduating classes allowed to return in preparation for their exams. Well, as the plans take off, what are the benefits, the threats or risks that really stare us in the face? There were some restrictions, modifications to this safe reopening, notably that daycare, primary, secondary, boarding schools, tertiary institutions are to remain closed. Only students in primary 6, Junior Secondary School, GSS 3, and Senior Secondary School 3, SS 3 students, they are the ones that should, of course, open in preparation for their exams. The government hopes that it will give them the ample opportunity to receive classes and adequately prepare for their exams. And this is since schools were shut in over 3 months. Now, our next slide takes us to the worry for a lot of parents, teachers, school owners, and the students themselves. How do they do this with the number of infections across the country we're still experiencing a rise? Well, according to professional health and safety guidelines and the protocols, the government insists that school authorities have to put measures in place ahead of the resumptions, providing hand washing facilities, checking body temperature, having disinfectants at all entry points to the major facilities, which include the gates, the hostels, classes, offices, proper social distancing measures in classes, meetings as well. The government also mandates that the entire premises of the institutions must be properly decontaminated with disinfectants while ensuring a high level of hygiene is maintained. Now, the next slide tells us a bit more about the risks and some of the threats. We haven't peaked, and we've been told that community transmission is ever stronger. But some groups like ANAP Foundation, Nigerian Medical Association, NMA, even the Nigerian Union of Teachers, NUT, have expressed reservations with the plans to reopen schools for this purpose. And we take a look at the merits and demerits of these concerns, some of them which include the possibility of some students carrying the virus likely to infect others, and also they're vulnerable at home, the elderly, or perhaps that there might be inadequate resources in most schools, like the public schools, for example, or there are even others who say that there's already a psychological impact of children staying at home. Students have lost a third of its annual academic calendar, and some people say that the interruption is too long, and so they indeed agree that schools should open at this time. But let's look at this data, and this is coming from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC. Week 9 to week 28, the highest age range affected is between 31 to 40 years, while we have the ages 20 to 30 and 40 to 50, the next highest. And of course, we're having more males that are affected than female. It seems that the productive population is most susceptible and the active so far. But will this age, sex, demographic figures change as schools reopen for students? How indeed much data do we have with regards to allowing students indeed go to school? And we're going to be looking at this with an expert from the NCDC who would be telling us more about the data and the science guiding the modifications to the extension of the second phase of the eased lockdown.
This is Channels Television's breaking news.
A news just coming in says that the federal government says Unity schools will not participate in the forthcoming WAEC examinations, and all federal government schools will not resume until they are considered safe. This is coming from the Minister of Education, Mr. Adamu, who disclosed this at the end of the Federal Executive Council meeting today. He's also asking the West African Examination Council, WAEC, and state governments to reconsider their decision to open schools for examination. So the breaking news is the federal government says Unity schools will not participate in the forthcoming WAEC exams, and all federal government schools are not to resume until they are considered safe. This was made by the Minister of Education today. He's also asked WAEC and state governments to reconsider their decision to open schools for exams. We'll bring you more details on the story as it unfolds. Today, passenger numbers were low at the Murtala Mohammed Airport as flight operations between Abuja and Lagos resumed after months of lockdown due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Our aviation correspondent, Bukola Jo-Ketumbi, monitored the situation in Lagos, reporting that the first flight departed from the domestic wing at 7:36 a.m. with 50% capacity. Passengers were wearing their face masks, observing social distancing, adhering to other COVID-19 protocols. But it was gathered that only 5 airlines have been given permission to fly.
I think it's very organized. It's very, very organized. And moreover, I came early. So I think by the time people start rushing, it might be a little bit cumbersome. Yeah, but for now, for today, I think it's organized. I appreciate it. I like it so much.
I don't see anything wrong in traveling this time since all safety measures have been put in place at the airports. Because when you get in, you have to sanitize your hand, your bag will be screened, and so many things like that. So it's safe.
In the nation's capital, passengers were also seen arriving at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport to board flights to Lagos. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 gave the go-ahead for the commencement of domestic flights following an approval by the President as the second phase of the eased lockdown extended by another 4 weeks. Staying with flights, we understand that more Nigerians returned today. Another evacuation flight arrived Lagos at about 3:30 p.m. with a total of 246 people aboard the Emirates. According to the Nigeria in Diaspora Commission chairman, Mrs. Abike Dabiri-Erewa, the UAE government paid for tickets and the cost of COVID-19 tests for 131 of the evacuees. She appreciated the Nigerian mission in Dubai and the UAE government via a Twitter post. So let's talk some more about how this pandemic is ravaging the world, especially Nigeria. We have Dr. John Oladejo. He is the incident manager of the National COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center at the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. He joins us from our Abuja studios. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right. Now, my earlier question was going to be that the data and science guiding the decisions on the lockdown ease, especially for students preparing for exams to begin, with regards to how promising and how reliable that is. But we're having this breaking story of, the decision from the Federal Executive Council as to Unity schools not participating in the forthcoming WAEC exams, and that the federal government saying schools will not resume until they're considered safe.
Yes. Thank you very much. This breaking news is as a result of the analysis we made during the week when we heard that the students will be resuming. So this analysis was made, and the Honorable Minister actually was fully involved in it. And we saw that the way the cases are actually going is not safe for our students to resume now. You know, we should be looking at the time when the curve will be flattened, towards maybe September, when we will have, seen the burden of this disease, and we will have had all the necessary, information on it, so that we'll be able to, advise our principals, in that vein.
So, with regards to the decision that was made in the first place, where did the science and data come from? And there was the assurance that the preventive protocols, the safety protocols would help with regards to the wearing of the face mask, the social distancing and all of those measures. I mean, if you're saying that we perhaps might work towards flattening the curve in September, what are the guarantees?
The guarantee is from the fact that we are actually stepping up our testing capacity. We are establishing collection centers in all the states of the Federation. We are actually starting with FCT. As we speak now, we are expanding our testing center in 8 hospitals. We are using both teaching hospital as well as secondary hospital. And LCDC is actually supporting each of these hospitals in setting up collection center. So by the time we set up all these collection centers in all the states as well as the FCT, we will be able to know the gravity, the burden of this disease, and then we will, have seen the way the curve is going, and we believe by this period we will have tested enough, and then be able to, flatten the curve at that particular level. So this one, we, informed, we make us to have informed decision on our students opening, our students resuming in the school. So these are the efforts we're actually making to ensure that we contain the disease and we ensure that everybody is safe, by using all our protocols and guidelines as stated on our websites.
All right, perhaps the next question is, with all the other West African students writing their exams, what happens to our students? But we'd like to thank you, Dr. John Oladejo, Incident Manager of the National COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center at the NCDC. Thank you for joining us. We have more on the COVID-19 updates when we return. Please stay with us. Welcome back, and we'd like to remind you of a story just in developing. The federal government says Unity schools will not participate in the forthcoming WAEC examinations, and all federal government schools will not resume until they are considered safe. The Minister of Education, Mr. Adamu Adamu, he disclosed this at the end of the Federal Executive Council meeting in Abuja. He's also asking WAEC and state governments to reconsider their decision to open schools for examinations. It's quite unclear if at the end of the day we might have federal schools, of course, not participating in the forthcoming exams and state schools participating. But of course, we'll continue to bring you more details as we get them. Let's go over to Bayelsa State, where at a market in Yenagoa, our correspondent visited there, and Dobra Timiwood, she went to find out what the safety protocols are being followed, and she brings us this update.
This is the Okata market, and if you look around properly, you wouldn't find one person using a face mask. We spoke with some residents of the state on why they aren't using the face mask.
Because some people don't know the wear, and that is why not the wear.
Like for me, if I wear the man, if it breathe well, they take me uncomfortable. So before you know, I don't shift down from mouth to to this place like this. So instead of that, I know just cook man the wear, but get and shower. But in places necessary, the wear, like places like bank, like today I go bank, I have to wear it before entering inside and all that.
Medical practitioners in Bayelsa State are calling on residents of the state to always use the face mask.
The truth is that we all of us have to take personal responsibility for our protection. People should ensure they wash their hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, and there are steps in doing this. And not just that, the use of face masks is not negotiable. And social distancing. This is not the time to begin to hug or shake hands with people. You can exchange pleasantries through other means. And people have to be constantly reminded that the virus is increasing. There's community spread. And if this is not contained, there will be a disaster for the states.
Unfortunately, I think in Bayelsa State, there is nothing like compliance. Because people still walk about without wearing face masks. People move in crowds. People still do things normally, to the best of my knowledge.
3 days ago, Bayelsa State recorded 23 new cases. Yesterday, it was 11 cases. Today, there was also an increase in the number of persons testing positive for the coronavirus. At the moment, Bayelsa State has 116 active cases for the coronavirus. From Yenagoa, Dobra Timiwood for COVID-19 updates.
COVID-19 pandemic has come with its right dimensions, with issues of stigma, discrimination, prevention of violence against women, support for vulnerable populations, quarantine and restrictive measures, shortages of supplies and equipment. Human Rights Watch says that addressing human rights is key to the COVID-19 response. But what are some of the health and human rights considerations with regard to the pandemic? We have Mr. Harry Obey. He is the Director, Women, Children, Vulnerable Groups, the Department of the National Human Rights Commission, NHRC. He joins us from Abuja studios. Mr. Obey, welcome to the program. First, if I may quickly get your thoughts on this breaking story we have, the federal government saying that Unity schools will not participate in the forthcoming exams until, of course, things are considered safe. And there's the advice to state governments that they should also reconsider the exams. Do you see a problem in the future with this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Millicent, and it's great to have me here. Yeah, the breaking news actually questions whether the expectation that school will resume soon will actually come to fruition or not, because it raises a very fundamental human rights issue of discrimination or disadvantage to some sector of the society if certain schools are allowed to open and others do not open. Meanwhile, they are supposed to take the same exam and all that. So for us as a commission, I just heard about the breaking news. It's something that the commission will have to look at critically and see how the directive for schools to reopen, subject to safety protocols and measures, can be done with some segments of the school resuming and others being asked not to resume. I think the federal government is just being mindful of the fact that we run a federalism and the fact that the states and other segments of the society have some decisions to make by saying that, okay, unity schools will not resume, the students in those schools will not partake in the WAEC exam, and now advising the states and WAEC to reconsider their decision to conduct exams and also to reopen their schools. I think what we have to do is to bring human beings into consideration as a center of whatever decision that has to be made. So if students at the federal schools or unity schools will be prevented from taking exams and other students are allowed to take exams, then what is the fate of the future of the students in federal schools or unity schools? So human rights has to be considered in taking a decision that affects everyone. So for me, it is a very dicey issue that the federal government is saying unity schools will not reopen, and advising the state to also reconsider. I think the states have to look at that too.
All right. Finally, what's your observation in other areas as to how government is integrating a human rights-based approach to the COVID-19 fight?
Yeah, I think we have made some progress. If you look at the trajectory since the lockdown started in terms of restrictions, easing up of restrictions, reaction of government institutions and personnel to enforcing the policies of restriction and all that. If you recall, the initial report that the National Human Rights Commission issued raised a lot of very serious human rights issues with regard to some killings by law enforcement agencies and all that. But subsequent report shows that we have made some progress in terms of consideration for human rights expectations. And so we don't have so many cases of shootings and all that anymore. However, there are some other areas where some human rights concerns are still being noticed from reports. So in terms of with regard to easing the restrictions and all that, you know that the federal government is considering the human rights or the freedom of movement of people and all that, so we can say that they are mainstreaming human rights into the pandemic management. But enforcing those even relaxed conditions has to be monitored closely to ensure that other human rights are actually not violated in that regard. So the fact that they are listening to concerns being raised by people, that rights are being impacted negatively, it's commendable that they are listening and that human rights is being mainstreamed into decisions that are made with regard to the COVID-19 management.
We appreciate your time, Mr. Harry Obey, the Director of Women, Children, Vulnerable Groups, the Department of the NHRC. Thank you for joining us at this time.
It's a pleasure.
Now, the U.S. has registered more than 60,000 new confirmed cases in the last 24 hours, a record high figure for the country. It comes as California and Texas each reported more than 10,000 new daily cases. Over in Brazil, some ministers who have recently come into contact with President Jair Bolsonaro are being tested for COVID-19 after he announced he had tested positive yesterday. Mr. Bolsonaro insisted he was already feeling fine, posting a video online of himself taking the controversial drug, hydroxychloroquine. The NCDC continues to work closely with states. You can find the latest national strategy to scale up access to coronavirus disease testing in Nigeria. There's several other information, COVID-19 regulations and guidelines. You can find that on their website. A live feed of the World Health Organization website also has regular updates about the spread of the pandemic. You can see the public health response at national and subnational levels. Our website, channelstv.com, has the latest news at your fingertips. That is channelstv.com. You can take a look at stories coming in from Nigeria and across the world. Well, that's the program. Thank you for watching the COVID-19 special edition on Channels Television in collaboration with the Ford Foundation. I'm Millicent Walker. Bye for now.
Stay connected to the world with